Welcome to my YouTube, Robin James, music and reviews. Welcome to my YouTube, Robin James, music and reviews. Welcome to Robin James Music and Reviews. I'm so happy to have you here for the fall season. As you take a look at my upcoming schedule, you'll see I've got a lot of great Halloween-related content for you. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the videos, and also leave a comment. Let me know what you think about the movie Halloween, or some of your favorite horror movies, or any movies you'd like to see me review in the future. With that said, happy Halloween,
and let's get started.
Thanks for joining me. Let's learn more about John Carpenter's Halloween from 1978. It was made by director and producer John Carpenter and produced by Deborah Hill. The main villain, Michael Myers, is a pop culture phenomenon, and Halloween has become an icon in the horror movie genre. As a young child, Michael kills his teenage sister, is sent to an insane asylum where he meets Dr. Loomis. Dr. Loomis attempts to save Michael but describes him as full of evil, emotionless, with a blank stare. He breaks out and returns home to terrorize babysitters as Laurie Strode, Dr. Loomis, and Michael Myers have an epic showdown on Halloween night. So this film was made by a group of small independent filmmakers. And really, other than Donald Pleasence as Dr. Loomis, it featured mostly young and upcoming actors and actresses. Carpenter had said even that the studio wanted a known actor in order to sell the film, have a name basically for the poster. And he'd always wanted to work with Donald Pleasence, and so they were really lucky, he felt, to get him. The film was relatively small in terms of budget. It was executive produced by Mustafa Akkad, and the budget was just $250,000. Which in Hollywood is just really not a lot. The producer Akkad had told his young filmmakers Carpenter and Hill that he basically wanted a movie where the boogeyman stalks babysitters. And it was really that simple. That was the original concept. But Carpenter and Hill built off that to make what ended up being a classic. A classic that would eventually bring the filmmakers $47 million at the box office, making it the most profitable independent film of all time. So with that, the filmmakers have created a very relatable concept. Everyone knew what a babysitter was. You could relate to the town of Haddonfield. They really were trying to reach the mainstream with their simple ideas. I think the major stroke of genius, though, was obviously setting the movie on Halloween night, which I believe was either Carpenter or Hill's idea. Looking back now, it would seem so weird if Michael Myers was stalking people, in the summer or spring break. He's very much the Halloween vibe. It's a very specific vibe. In fact, I'd have a hard time watching this movie if it's not in the fall time. The movie spawned 11 sequels at this point. In fact, Jamie Lee stars in another one coming up in just a few weeks, Halloween Ends. And the story in the original is much less complicated. In fact, to the point where Laurie Strode was not related to Michael Myers at all. Basically, they needed a twist in the second one. So similar to like a Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker twist, they decided to make the characters related to maybe up the ante, I guess, with the tension there. and the lore, giving it some more backstory. Because in the first Halloween, there's not really a ton of backstory. They do show us what happens when he's a kid, but they don't really go into really why and all those things. But it's left up for your own imagination. I think, obviously, the reason he comes back to Haddonfield is because he wants to reclaim his home, and he also he's a psycho, so he's out to kill more teenage babysitters who he thinks are promiscuous, right? Like, he had witnessed his sister having sex when he was a kid, and it obviously was traumatic and made him snap. And I believe that's the best theory of why he actually comes back. It has nothing to do with Jamie Lee Curtis, Laurie Strode character, being his sister in the first one. I just want to remind you, at the end of the video, we will have some filming locations. I was able to make it to South Pasadena, and it was very interesting because the locations are very close together. So you really get a sense of, as a small independent movie, they really wanted all the locations to be very close so they could jump from scene to scene and not have to waste a bunch of time and money, because they did have a very strict budget. And before we go any further in the review, we definitely need to talk about the addition of John Carpenter's iconic score. The music just helps this film a ton. It really ramps up that tension. It lets you know when Michael Myers is coming. When we should sort of be scared, the tempo will go in and out, maybe get quiet, and then a jump scare comes. I really believe if you take the score away and you give it just some, stock score that would be in any horror movie, it just would not play the same. This movie, in fact, might be really too slow in the first half without the score, without Michael lurking around. So really, the John Carpenter score, I think, is just as iconic as Michael Myers himself. There is really also no contemporary score. There's not a lot of regular music played throughout the movie, but one song that I noticed on my most recent rewatch was they play Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper, which is a classic and is used in a few horror movies for sure that I can think of, and they play it here while they're smoking the joint and driving up to the hardware store. And Laurie's pretty nervous as they run into Annie's dad, Sheriff Brackett. He's just responded to a break-in at the hardware store where he thinks some teens are to blame for stealing a mask, knife, and some rope. And the way the sheriff almost seems to not care is sort of funny to me. They might want to get on that. And so the movie was a breakout role for the young actress Jamie Lee Curtis. She played our protagonist. She becomes the eventual final girl, which is a famous term now for the female lead that makes it through a horror movie. And John Carpenter actually felt that with Jamie being the daughter of Janet Leigh, who was Marion Crane in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, that it was like a good omen for his movie. It would add mystique and intrigue and maybe help also with the marketing to say, hey, we have, the daughter of the Psycho actress in our horror movie. It couldn't hurt.
I forgot my chemistry book.
So who cares? I always forget my chemistry book and my math book.
And she did end up being the perfect fit to play Laurie Strode. She came off more innocent than her friends. Jamie stated she was actually more the cheerleader type in high school and not as reserved as this character, but obviously that's a sign of a good actress, is that she could play this more introverted role who actually she seems a little timid, a little scared. And she very much was the standout of the actresses in this. I felt when they were together as a trio, they all did wonderfully. But when the two other girls are like on their own, the acting is pretty terrible actually, and could be a little bit annoying. But when they're together, they're great. But you can see Jamie Lee is definitely the star of the film. So Michael Myers at this point has escaped from the asylum. He has murdered a tow truck driver. He's stole his clothes and he heads off to Haddonfield. But I find it interesting, that he didn't keep the tow truck, and instead of the car from the sanitarium, it basically says a Smith Grove Sanitarium on the side of the car, and he's a giant man wearing a mask, driving around in broad daylight. You'd think Dr. Loomis and the cops would have a pretty easy time following him or finding him, but that's just one of the funny things in this movie. A little bit of plot holes here and there for sure, but it doesn't affect the strength of this film. So, and what's the movie really about? It's explained actually pretty directly in a school, a scene where she's at school by the teacher, and the theme is fate, and that fate basically can't be stopped.
Destined to his own
And it's
fate.
common in horror movies. If you pay attention to the teacher, you can hear what it's really about. But I think the filmmakers count on us, to ignore what teachers are saying. But she does describe fate, and the Loomis character is also telling everyone he comes across that evil's coming. It's basically the fate that this evil is coming to town. They can't stop it. It doesn't matter what you do. Michael Myers is gonna come. He's gonna fuck you up. So the fate is set up very well in this film, and once it goes from day to night, the mood really changes because he went from pretty easy to see out in the daylight to now he's in the shadows. And Dean Cundy, who filmed this thing, is another amazing get for this movie because he's an all-time cinematographer. He worked on such films as Back to the Future, Jurassic Park, Apollo 13 after, working on Halloween. So, his camera work and lighting are just amazing in this movie. And he really uses those shadows and the lights to hide Michael in certain scenes. And when he comes out, it's super scary to the audience. It really sets up the tension when the techniques are used correctly, when we think he might be lurking in the shadows. Throughout the film, with the music, with Michael always being like this impending doom. And again, on Halloween night or during the time, the mood really strikes well. And you can feel it build and build until eventually it snaps and he just goes on his killing spree at night. Even with budgetary constraints, they really did a good job with the look of this film. I mean, it looks really good. There's some shots that aren't perfect, but overall, for being an independent film, it's far above what it should be. And Michael Myers is really seen as this unstoppable force once the nighttime hits. And one thing I did find interesting was that there's really a lack of actual blood in the movie. It more implies the blood, similar to like a Hitchcock movie, I think, where, also Spielberg with Jaws, they imply the thing, and it's more scary in our own mind in a lot of cases. And so now, though, he's made his way to the babysitters' houses, and he's murdering Laurie's friends, but she still doesn't quite know. And that's an awesome technique too, is where certain characters are given some information and some characters aren't. So we as the audience, we're yelling at the screen, you got to get out of there, but she really doesn't know that it's that bad. But eventually Tommy Doyle yelling and screaming, the boogeyman's here, and then as the audience, we've lost all hope. We're just feeling like Laurie's gonna fucking die. There's no way she's getting out of this. Michael's gonna kill her. And it feels like a helpless situation. But after a struggle and a fight that's really epic and can bring out some screams, especially for a person who hasn't seen Halloween before, I think it's legitimately scary there at the end. But Dr. Loomis and Laurie sort of together team up to what we think kill him. And so there's like this brief moment of relief for us, but then we're shown that he disappears. And I think that's what set off the sort of he's another worldly thing. He's not just quite human. And the sequels really took off on that idea. So another cool tidbit, I think, is that the mask was actually a William Shatner mask. That's a scary thought on its own. And they were having a tough time finding the right scary mask for the killer. And nothing was working. Nothing looked good on camera or really scary. So they found a William Shatner Star Trek mask, did some aging and effects work on it, and boom, I mean, they made a scary as hell mask that gives off this really blank, evil look, and when he stares and tilts his head, it's very effective. It's really good stuff. The mask has been changed throughout the series. It's never really quite been like it was in the original, and some have been good and some have been absolutely terrible. I do prefer the mask from the original. So I'd like to just wrap up my thoughts here on the movie. I hope I've given you a lot of good information and a little bit about the setting, the journey that some of our characters went on. But just to really review it, I think this is one of the best horror movies of all time. I didn't fall in love with this movie when I was a kid. I fell in love with it sort of in my mid to late 20s, to be honest. But for the last 10 years, I've watched it on Halloween night, and I've been borderline obsessed with the trivia and the documentaries and the journey that these filmmakers and actors and actresses went on to make it. I think it's a really beautiful thing when you can come together and make something great that really had no business being as good as this. And so it's a real inspirational movie for me as someone who's creative and enjoys those things. So with that said, I hope you had a fun time with me today and maybe a few scares while we learned about Halloween. And now let's take a trip to South Pasadena, California, the filming locations of Haddonfield, Illinois. It was fun to visit them. They look a lot like they did in the movie. You should be able to recognize them. Oh, and by the way, don't forget to check the closet tonight. The boogeyman might be in there.
Yeah, trick or treat, give me all your candy. Man, I'm feeling fine and fucking dandy. I rolled up another one, that shit came in handy. Rolled up another one, that shit came in handy.
DejaVu.
Hey, your house, hit that shit, do it now.
Yeah. You eat it up, eat it up, eat it. Eat it like candy. Filling your Halloween buckets with Xannies. Dressed up like granny, tie up your nanny. Tell all our neighbors we ran out of candy. They know I got edibles. Eat up this beat like a cannibal. Eat these rap bitches like Hannibal. Fuck a chainsaw, I got Rugers. Your nigga turned me to a cougar. Cut a bitch like my name Freddy Cougar. These clown like a host need to sue us. Listen, trick or treat, kill a beat. I got something good to eat. He a treat, I'm a treat. I'm sour but my pussy sweet, yeah. On Halloween day, young rich bitch, she gon' slay. Like a kid on Halloween day, I just won't play. Like Michael Myers killing these hoes every day. If I'm bad girl, then Robin gon' be my bae.
And it would be sweet if we could trick or treat.